When the Legends Die, Chapter 28. They went northeast into Colorado again, but Red couldn't get things going his way. When they found a town with free money, the bettors were suspicious of Red or of Tom. When betting money was tight and Tom rode for purses, the purses were small. Red wouldn't admit it, but Tom had outgrown the look of a country boy, an awkward Indian kid. On the street or even on foot in the arena, he might look like a novice, but once in the saddle, his skill and experience couldn't be hidden. He knew all the tricks, all the slick ways to lose a go-round, but even the judges seemed to sense that something was wrong. They didn't disqualify him once, but the bettors were suspicious and refused to walk into Red's set-up traps. With the truck, they could cover more ground, so they had no luck in Colorado. They went up into Wyoming. Red made 2 good cleanups there. Then they moved into lower Idaho, and from there turned south into Utah. Finally, Red said, "We're not getting anywhere, and the season's about over anyway. We're going home." So they went home, to rest, to eat Mio's beans and chili, to wait for spring and a new season. Late February, when Red was full of plans again, this time they would go to southern Arizona, where Red said there always was plenty of sucker money. But it was the same old story, except that there were fewer rodeos in southern Arizona. They played only 4 shows between Gila Bend and Bisbee, and Red won less than $100. "Man could starve to death here," Red said. "We're going to Texas." They stopped in Denning for a show, and Tom picked up enough purse money to buy gas and hamburgers. El Paso, Fort Stockton, Sonora, and Fredericksburg treated them little better. Red couldn't raise a bet. They kept going east, and finally they passed Austin, and Red brightened. "Now we're getting over in God's country, my old stomping grounds. My old man had a cotton patch over east near Crockett, and when I left home I worked this whole country with Doc Barlow, from Trinity River to Eagle Pass. Now we'll be eating high on the hog." But it turned out to be a scrawny hog. Things had changed, apparently, since Red was there with Doc Barlow, but finally they hit a town where the pool hall crowd had been winning racehorse money from the bookies, and Red set them up for a final round killing. Tom did his part, and Red collected close to $1,000, his first real triumph that spring. But after that, even Tom's luck began to run out. He couldn't seem to win, even when Red was ordering him to. Finally, Red demanded, "What the hell's going on?" "I'm getting tired, I guess. My timing's off." "Timing? Hell, you can ride or you can't. I know you can ride when you want to, and you damn well better ride in this next show." They were in Duval County, west of Corpus Christi, and it was June. The show opened for 2 go-rounds. Tom's luck seemed to be coming back. He made good, clean rides, scored high. Then, in the finals, he drew a particularly mean horse, and he knew he was going to lose as soon as he got in the saddle. He not only lost, he was thrown for the first time that season. Red was furious. Tom wondered if Red was going to try to trounce him, and for the first time he wasn't afraid. He half hoped Red would try, because he believed he could at least make a fight of it. But Red didn't make a pass at him. Instead, he cursed and demanded, "What happened this time?" "I don't know. I was going all right in the first 2 go-rounds. Then I seemed to lose my time, and I don't know what happened." "I was way ahead of you," Red snapped. "I figured you might throw it, so I laid off. Didn't bet a dime on you. But you should have took the purse." "I'm tired, Red. Let's go home." "Home? We're not going home broke. No, siree. There's a show up in Uvalde County next week. We're working it. Understand? If we win, then we'll go home. But if you lose—" Red rubbed his fist and laughed, a short, ugly laugh. So they drove north to Uvalde County. They took a room at the hotel, and Red said, "I'm going out and set things up. You stay here till I get back. Get rested up if you're so goddamn tired." When Red hadn't come back by supper time, Tom went to a nearby cafe and ate alone. Red still hadn't come back when Tom returned to the room, so he went to bed early. It was after midnight when Red came in, stumbling and obviously drunk. Tom pretended to sleep, and Red fell into bed. He was still sleeping the next morning when Tom went out to breakfast. Then Tom went out to the arena to look at the horses and listen to the talk of the riders and hangers-on. Nobody paid any attention to him. He wandered around the arena, paused at the chutes, and listened to the men loafing there. It was the old, familiar talk about horses and women, the same old stories. He listened a little while, then went over and climbed into the empty stands and sat in the sun. And the questions came. Who am I? Where am I? Where do I belong? Back in his memory, like a dream, he saw a boy he once knew, a boy called Bear's brother, a boy who lived in the mountains in the old ways, a way that was now past, gone, cut off. Then, also far back in his memory, there was another boy, Thomas Blackbull, a boy who lived on the reservation, braided hair ropes and bridles, rode ponies in the creek bed sand, herded sheep for Albert Left Hand. He had known those boys. He remembered them. But he wasn't Bear's brother, and he wasn't Thomas Blackbull. Then he saw another boy in the corral at Red Dillon's place, learning to be a bronc rider, learning how a bucking horse acted, how to ride clean, how to ride dirty, how to win, how to foul out, learning to do what he was told to do. That boy was partly himself, but still a stranger. That was the boy to whom old Mio once said, "You want to make a rumble in the belly of life." He sat there, remembering, and he saw a little whirlwind pick up a puff of dust down in the arena and swirl it past the loafers sitting beside the chutes. The dust hid the men for a moment, and he saw a crowd of riders there, shouting to each other, swearing at the horses, laughing, arguing. He heard the horses puffing, grunting, squealing, making the planks of the chutes clatter and groan. Saddles creaked, stirrups rattled, spurs jingled. The pickup men rode into place. The crowd cheered, stamped, whistled. The 10-second horn bellowed. Hooves drummed. Bat-winged chaps slapped like hand claps. His nose quivered at the smell of horse sweat, man sweat, in the smell of the corrals, fresh pine oozing pitch, fresh hay, manure, urine. The choking alkaline smell of dust churned up in the arena, and the hot, clean smell of sunlight, the cool, clean smell of a cloud shadow. The smell of hot, sweaty leather, the horse smell, the sweat and wool smell of saddle blankets, the smell of old boots, dirty Levi's, sweaty shirts, the leather and horse smell of your own hands, the sour smell of your own hatband. He saw the horses, rolling their dark eyes till the whites showed, baring their yellow teeth, laying back their angry ears, rippling a shoulder or a flank nervously, switching a tense tail. Hunching under the feel of the saddle and the chute, tensing every muscle as you let yourself down into the saddle, felt for the stirrups, the big horses, long-legged, bow-necked, the blocky ones, short-coupled, big in the barrel, hard muscles in the hips and shoulders, the bawlers, the squealers, the silent ones that saved their wind for the bucking. He felt the tightness in his belly as he sat in the saddle, braced, just before the gate opened, the quiver in his legs, spurs hooked just ahead of the horse's shoulders. That first lunge, the jab of the cantle in the small of his back, the thrust of the pommel in his lower gut, the feel of the horse you got through the rein, taut in your left hand, the feel of his ribs beneath your calves, his shoulders beneath your thighs, the feel of the stirrups, the rake of the spurs, the rhythm. The jolt of the ground through the horse's stiff legs, like a hammer blow at the base of your spine. The way a horse eases off just before the 10-second horn. The way another horse makes a final desperate lunge just as you relax. The bellow of the horn, the grab for the pickup man, the vault from the saddle. The feel of the ground again, the ride done and over, and the weakness in your knees. The exhilaration, the sense of mastery. The contest won, not over the other riders, but over the horse, the violence, the elemental force, the sense of triumph, of mastery, and then the slow letdown. The sun was beating on him. The arena lay hot and quiet, only the few loafers there at the chute still talking, still laughing at the same old woman jokes, the empty stands around him. He left the stands and went back to the hotel.